Welcome to this meeting, which is organized by the itinerant study group, which is called Beyond the Post-Soviet, in collaboration with the Lviv Municipal Arts Center and Ekaterina Botanova. So first of all, we'd like to thank everyone who helped that this meeting takes place here today. The Lviv Municipal Arts Center and Lana Mitsko, who is the director of the center. Then, of course, Pavla Kovach, who invited us here. Of course, Katerina Botanova, who will be our speaker. Jan Baczynski, who did a visual contribution for this session that we'll talk about later. Also, Roman Mamitov, who is responsible for the technical installation here. And also, I would like to thank Institut Français, the French Institute, and personally Glenn Delaporte, who supported my residency in Ukraine. So first, we will explain to you how this meeting will go. The first part will be the introduction. Every speaker, so me, Yulia, Pavlo, and Katerina, and also Jan, will invite you to present yourself in a few words. Usually we ask everyone to present themselves, but we are too many today. I mean, every participant is usually presenting themselves at the very beginning. So what we're going to do is we ask people to present themselves in a few words if they take the word, if they intervene online or offline. Then we'll hear Pavlo's introduction about the Lviv Municipal Arts Center, and then we'll move on to the first part. So the first part, Yulia and me, we're gonna explain to you a little bit the functioning of our group, and also we'll try to do a short summary of the knowledge which has been produced so far by our group. After that, we're going to move on to a contribution by Katerina Botanova, who will speak about her research and her work in progress for the Organic Communities exhibition program for Gem Factory, which will open next year here in Lviv. And after that, we will listen to Jan Baczynski, who will comment on the visual contribution on the poster that he produced for today. And then we'll have a common discussion. So I give the word maybe to Yulia, if you want to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Sasha, and thank you all for being here and joining us from all over the world, and also joining us in Lviv. I'm Julia Fíš. I'm a curator and researcher, and my interest is more in topics of memory and archaeology of memory, but also in context of post-Soviet monuments, in the way how we can approach it and how we can work with these topics artistically and curatorially. I was one of the initiators of this group together with Sasha at the very beginning, I'm still on the way collecting and reflecting knowledge that I had before and that I have now, and that I produce with you all. I'm not going to say more because I think it's for now it's enough. So Sasha, it's your turn.
Yes, thanks, Yulia. So my name is Sasha Pevak. I'm based in Paris, and I identify myself as interdependent art worker. And I have the practices of curator, researcher for a PhD, and an artist and a writer. I work on different topics which link contemporary art with political or social or economic issues. And I'm also writing a thesis at Paris 8 University, which is devoted to Soviet mythologies around the body. So I think from here comes the link to the question of the post-Soviet and decolonization, which we explore in the group. So maybe I'll give the word to Pavlo.
Yeah, please. My name is Pavla Kovach. I am one of two curators in Lviv Municipal Art Center. We are a very young institution. We are just 1 year old. We are supported by city government, and yeah, I'm a curator, also an artist, a participant of open group. I think that's all. Thank you very much that you're coming. You're welcome.
My name is Katerina Botanova, and it's an interesting chance for me to bring together two very different contexts and two different stories in my professional life, because Julia is my colleague based also in Basel, and I'm currently based in Basel, where I'm curating a multidisciplinary festival, Culturescapes, which is actually happening right now as we're talking. Yeah, for Julia, I joined the discussion group, and I know all of you and also Sasha only online, and now first time offline. And the context of Ukraine, which is my base and also my research base and my intellectual base, and my colleagues with whom we work on the project for Jam Factory.
Thank you very much. Jan, would you mind saying a few words?
My name is Jan Buczynski. I'm from Lviv, and I'm a visual artist. Mainly I work with the topic of LGBT, but also with the commemoration of collective traumas and with the decommunization, and that's why I'm really excited to be here with you.
Thank you. So I don't know, Pablo, if you want to add something more on the place and its history.
No, I don't know. Like I said, it's a very young institution. So I think important to say that 10 years ago, with my friends, I'm co-founder of Detempula Gallery, which is self-organized gallery. And now, after 10 years, we have like first municipal art center. I think it's important to say like this line, how it's changed. Yeah, so we have like exhibition hall, we have a lecture hall, and I think that's all. We have a place for more social exhibition also, yes.
Perfect. So Julia, shall we tell about the group? Yes?
Yes. We try to make it brief, if possible.
And maybe we will also, so we'll be talking about 15 minutes, I think, with Julia, and then maybe we'll ask the people who already participated in the group also to share the knowledge they obtained through the group. Do you start, or?
Yeah, we decided to make it very fluid, and I hope that we will manage to keep it short and to feel full of statements and important information we would like to share with you. I think that from my perspective, what I would like to say before we come to the knowledge, or kind of we try to share with you something that we have already produced together before over 4 meetings that happened in our group, that we cannot share with you today any answers or outputs, but rather we're sharing with you the process we're going through in the producing of this knowledge and deconstructing those ideas and images that we might have inherited from our places of origin. So actually we do not consider us as experts in decolonial studies or any of these topics, but more like researchers who invite out other researchers to go this way together and to share experiences, to discuss theories, and to try to deconstruct some stereotypes, and to produce another type of knowledge based on different perspectives and based on different sources.
Maybe I would like to add so that our group is called BLD Post-Soviet, and from the beginning we wanted to be a horizontal group, an itinerant group, which means that of course we initiated with Yulia, but every participant is sharing the same place as us, proposing different topics and discussing things together with us. So this was an important part. The core concepts, as the title, as the name of the group suggests, is the post-Soviet. What is the post-Soviet? What is the post-Soviet space? How can we go beyond the existing notions of the post-Soviet? Because as we know, these spaces are extremely heteroclitic, and we cannot apply the same term to different regions of this space. We also wanted to approach the post-Soviet and the post-Soviet space through a decolonial prism, through decolonial theory, at the same time trying to understand the origins of this approach and the origins, the genealogy of these discourses, because these discourses very often come from the Western space. So to approach all these questions and also other questions which are linked to our research with Yulia or to the research of the participants, we have defined 3 cycles so far, and the meeting of today is closing the first cycle, which is called decolonization. The second cycle that will start right after will be called myth, symbol, brand, and it will talk about mythologies, cultural symbols, and the way cultural symbols are often transformed into brands today by some of the post-Soviet countries. And the third cycle is memory archaeology, the archaeology of memory. So today with this meeting, which is called In Between Decolonization and Desovietization, we're closing the first cycle, decolonization. It doesn't mean that the knowledge that we have produced so far is exhaustive, not at all. There are many topics in relation to these questions that we didn't cover so far, but we hope that we'll be able to come back to them later during our further sessions and discussions.
You want me to continue? Yes, and to approach this topic, we have used different types of knowledges and as well as tools, so to say, or instruments. So we turn to theoretical sources and books and articles, and sometimes also personal sources like invited personalities. This was our kind of theoretical basis that we tried to reflect together and to discuss and critically approach. And also for us it was important to approach it through the perspective of memory and narrative and personal narratives of the people who live in different places. Our group so far happened in Paris twice, but also in Paris in Lithuanian embassy, in Moscow, and in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, and now in Lviv. And for us it's important within this group using a private perspective on this topic and personal narrations, also to have the ability to ask those questions that are uncomfortable and that are not discussed or neglected by academic research, and so as like how to talk about zones of conflict that were in the past or still in present to be defined, so how to define one's identity, what can we share, what kind of common ground we have, and what separates us today. And we actually also use as a source our emotions, like anger, shame, or doubts, whatever, what can help us to approach it, to reflect, and artworks. So far we invited 4 artists to contribute to group and to show their pieces and to talk about pieces. Those are Anastasia Sosunova, Taos Mahacheva, Faina Yunusova, and today Jan Baczynski.
Yeah. We also, to be able to interact in the group, we also agreed on a set of, let's say, values from the very beginning, which are the three values: collectivity, equality, and mutual care. So what does collectivity mean? It means that the group is a community based on professional interests and a set of ethical principles. We realize collective knowledge production within a non-consensual collectivity, which means that we are not obliged to agree on everything, but to try to accept the opposite or different points of view. And also the knowledge we create can be used equally by each member of the collective, as well as become open source. So we can share openly all the documentation and all the resumes that we do. Equality means there is no superior authority in the discussion, there are no rights or wrongs, all points of view have the same value, and different types of knowledge share the same status, which means theoretical knowledge, emotions, or knowledge from pop culture, personal experiences, etc., etc. And finally, mutual care, which is extremely important, means that we praise mutual care, attention, and respect. We try with this group to create a safe space where we have a margin for error, where every emotion or every doubt of the participant is respected. Great. Then we, of course, we also produce documentation, as you may see. So we collect the video footage, and we also create summaries of our discussions that we share after with every participant.
Is there a question? No. Okay, so we talked a lot about how the group is structured or named, and now maybe we try to recap something that we've gone through. But I think what I also wanted to mention, this is our first time we're trying to share this knowledge, because it was we were in the process of producing it and trying to preserve it through documentation. But it's the first attempt to share it with you, and don't consider it as like the final state or the statement that we selected.
I think this is this is something that maybe something that remained, or something that we consider with Sasha when we talk about it important for us, but it's not the final state of the knowledge, and therefore we invite you all who were following the group over these meetings also to contribute to this recap, and maybe to share something that you've considered important or interesting. So yeah, how it started. We had the launch meeting where actually we focused on the topic, what are our common interests, what we share, what we are searching for in this group. And it appeared that this group collected and attracted people who have their own concerns, who search for their identity as well, because lots of people, and we are with Sasha, we found ourselves living outside of our place of origin and looking at it from the outside perspective. For us who joined the group, it was important to share, to speak about memory and individual and academic and artistic researches around this topic. And this group initially gathered people with different backgrounds. So we have chosen this language, which is also can be perceived as colonial English, but since we are joining from different cities and topics and backgrounds, so we decided to speak English to find a little bit common ground. Our first meeting after the launch, we took Madina Tlastanova text, what does it mean to be post-Soviet, as a source to reflect together, and we used the instrument apprentage, where we shared the text between 6 participants and tried to retell each other. So in retelling, to produce another type of knowledge and perception. And if talking about Tlastanova, and beginning with her, for me, it was important to understand that the knowledge we research, the topic we search, this is the topic that lays in the state of in-betweenness, non-existent state. Tlastanova writes about it that the sea of time almost probably went round us, left us behind, discarded in some cases as if we were fish, suffocation on a dry sandy shore. So for me, it was important to understand that, and what Tlastanova also points out, that this state of the post-Soviet remained in many areas still unreflected, unprocessed, and in some cases even problematic, because the reflection on it is still a taboo. And in some places, maybe they're more progressive, but for many people to reflect on this post-Soviet state, post-Soviet idea, is the feeling of the fish on this shore. It's important. It was important also for me to understand that colonization has, according to Tlastanova also, that there are different types of colonization, which can be also perceived through the not only from the territorial colonization, but also from internal colonization, when inside the country there is a domination of not like a racial difference that actually informs the way the society is structured and the state is structured, but so to say, like a state that acts as a dominating, so to say, race. And also that there is a issue that colonization can exist not only territorially, but also chronologically, when we try to assign certain nation and countries not to certain period of time, when so defining something as being very progressive, and some countries that are trying to keep up, trying to actually to reach the state of the progressive countries. So there are different ways how to actually approach this topic, and different types that Tlastanova defined as a state of colonization. And for her, this idea of decolonial studies, not idea, but the decolonial studies in connection with post-socialist countries, she names it as a borrowed by post-socialist countries, as in a way a tool or a method also to research the state of this post-Soviet state, the state of betweenness.
After Tlastanova, we also discussed a text by Alexander Kyoshev that you might know, who wrote this famous essay, which is called Self-Colonizing Metaphor. And so Alexander Kyosif, who is a Bulgarian historian. And again, I think during this session, we were talking about different types of colonization which may exist, which can take form of physical domination, physical colonization, of colonial domination, of internal colonialism, crypto-nationalism, and also self-colonization, or as he calls it, interiorized colonial hegemonies. So we were discussing how colonization may act beyond physical domination, and how cultural domination takes place through social life and social imagination of this or that country. How this social imagination is also shaped under the influence of colonial domination. We were talking about some notions which marked me a lot. For example, a notion of civilizational rating. I don't know if you heard if this is something which is often in use, but Kyosif uses this notion. So what does it mean, civilizational rating? It means the way of how do you rate your civilization comparing with the West, looking to the West. Or in other words, to which point is a society civilized when compared to the West? And here, this is, of course, one of these examples of interiorized colonial hegemonies, where we try to evaluate our own society through the Western prism, through the prism of the Western civilization. And this also, I think, is connected to the images of non-Western regions as being non-civilized before. For example, he speaks about something that we inherited from the era of Columbus, where arriving to the unknown lands, the natives were often described by the Westerns as monsters, or there are different types of images or descriptions. So this is something that has imprinted yes, our own mental image very much. We also talked about so, of course, about different psychological aspects of self-colonization. But we also, some of our members also suggested that self-colonization should not be seen just as something negative. It's not negative nor positive, but it is a fact. And sometimes if a person doesn't have or doesn't feel that they have an identity, they sometimes try to absorb this identity. This process can be seen as a searching for an identity, a process of self-discovery. Through discovery of other civilization, you can understand better your own culture. And also what can be considered as self-colonization from the outside may not be perceived as such by the subject. Or also, sometimes if we look at different regions and different cultures from this point of view, we probably don't understand exactly how cultural influences operate in this or that subject. They probably do not correspond to this Western paradigm of cultural influences, and they escape the Western binarity between the colonizer and the colonized. And we had an interesting example of this, for example, in relation to the language and to a certain city that we talked about during our session with Alexei Ulko, who is a Tashkent-based researcher, who told us about Samarkand and the way languages, for example, coexist in Samarkand, and the fact that there have been a lot of cultural influences and a lot of hybridization For example, people can talk different languages at the same time or mixing languages, which seemed to us as an interesting example. I know, Julia, if you want to add something, or we
maybe briefly, if you already touched the Tashkent meeting, even though we haven't made yet the conspect of this meeting, but yes, it's I think that Tashkent as a continuation of his self-colonization topic was interesting because Faina Yunusova was presenting there her research, which she based on her family photos, that she found in family archive when she was taking photos with Mickey Mouse or some symbols of Western culture. And it appeared that like lots of kids her age had the same photos, and that was actually in these photos from Uzbekistan and from Tashkent. It was from her perspective, it was the idea of belonging or the desire to belong to another reality through these like attributes. So something like from these Western images placed in Tashkent, like part of West or part of Europe in another reality. And through that, they felt like a connection to this culture or belonging to this culture, and simultaneously hating themselves, belonging to another culture. So kind of being in this state of the conflict. And this is, I think this is very interesting in connection to this self-colonization topic that we discussed based on Kiosif text. And yes, and the meeting that we had in Uzbekistan once again revealed the topic of the language, which is very important in the whole context of the post-Soviet studies, because also in Tashkent and Uzbekistan, the Uzbek language was in one moment replaced by Russian, as in many Soviet countries, that the native language was even forbidden and not spoken, and now it's kind of other way around. So those who immigrated from these lands do not speak anymore their language, their Uzbek language, and feel ashamed for not speaking and like being shamed by others who speak Uzbek language. Sometimes, yeah, there is like a hybridization and collision of the languages, Russian and Uzbek language, which produces another type of the language as like a hybrid state, as it was also in the piece of Anastasia Sosunova, like the dog that was like artificially produced with the two heads. So this is like for me, it's a great metaphor of this Soviet colonization and the state of this hybrid state, and maybe in some case artificial state that was left on these territories after Soviet time. So this is like yeah, maybe brief insight, but we still have to produce maybe some conspect. And maybe one important thing that I wanted to tell, that we tried to collect this documentation and write conspects that we would be happy to share with you all if you have interested after the meeting to share the materials that we collected. Maybe we can a little bit open to other participants who've been also taking part in other meetings that we had, that you maybe can contribute to something that we spoke with Sasha about. I mean, what your perception of, if we try to wrap up, what you can share from those meetings that you've been taking part.
Maybe we can also do it later.
I've been...
Yes.
Sorry.
My name is Maria, sorry. And I'm originally from St. Petersburg. I lived a long time in the States, and now I'm based in Paris. And I work in experimental film, and I'm interested in the subject of post-Soviet studies for a research project that I'm working on right now. But I'm totally discovering all this literature, and yeah, I'm very thankful for this encounter. And yeah, regarding the meetings that I have participated in, I can just say that they have all forms. That's something I really appreciated. We have at the same time watched video art pieces. We had discussions that sometimes were quite personal. Like I remember Iranian embassy, we discussed with two girls who are from Lithuania, the terminology that we can use about the Soviet period, with occupation or colonization, or it's so different from the official way of speaking about it. And I have to say that I think I was very touched by Faina Musa's project, particularly because it was a mixture of her personal memories that clearly had a lot of emotion attached to them. And I think it was interesting how she was working through her own feelings to create an analysis. So I guess that's what I can say. I have liked the fact that we touch on the personal and on the theoretical. Yeah.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, maybe I can say something from my side. Also, not being, I would say, like originates from one of the post-Soviet countries. I found interesting this very non-hierarchical base practice that we are doing, so that everyone is bringing his own knowledge or can bring their experience. So the example of Faina is very interesting because she brings really the knowledge, and also as an artist, her knowledge. So it was interesting to discuss this, also concerning one of the texts that Sasha mentioned about self-colonization, that we also had some discussions and some parallel with other colonizations that, for example, being from France, we can make the parallel and maybe use some methodologies of the post-Soviet studies that we know from different contexts to maybe dig into more the subject we are dealing with in the studying group. So I find it very interesting. This is non-hierarchical, and I would say sharing the knowledge that everyone has, and to maybe dig more and to bring more knowledge into this group.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. Okay, maybe so we'll have a discussion after, and we can also talk with the participants from the previous meetings. So maybe we'll move on for now and give the word to Katerina. So Katerina, who will share elements of her research, and maybe also the curatorial team of the Gem Factory would like to add something after.
I would actually really hope that the team will join and not just add something after. I took the invitation to be part of this discussion, as I said before, because I was the part of the group, and it felt more used to be in Zoom and in the screen than live. It's the first time live. But I think it's important and interesting part that, as you said, that this is a group of researchers that share knowledge and collect questions. And I think it really resonates to what we are trying to do with our group, because we're also a curatorial team, curatorial group. And we also work as, or at least we try to work as a horizontal collective of people who collect questions, agree and disagree, and exercise mutual care. maybe the difference is that at a certain moment we have to reach a certain agreement because there has to be a project, right? A project is a certain way of building consensus in any case. But what I think is important, and also in the context of this talk, that it's an important and often invisible part of curatorial work, the process of negotiation, the process of research and disagreements. And what we're doing now, and what I will be trying to do in the next few minutes, is actually not to present a concept as a ready idea which will be implemented in an exhibition and an opening sequence of events for an institution, but rather as a thinking and questioning field, and try to trace sort of the thoughts and the questions we collected, and rather stay at the moment and the level of questions and see how those questions can resonate with the group. And maybe we can think together about the questions, or also consider leaving certain questions and certain methodological clashes as a productive moment, which does not necessarily cause for an answer in any given moment. So for the members of the group, in a couple of words, there's a new institution which is to be opened in Lviv next year. That's called the Gem Factory Art Center. And here in the physical audience, there's a director of Gem Factory, which is great, which came. And the institution commissioned a project for the opening. And I think it's an important part of the story, because it's always a question, what do you do as a curator being commissioned a project in a lineup of a project when yours is like one of many in the sequence? There's a different question if you're commissioned a project which is to open something. And then the first question you ask is how much the project that you come up with connected to the institution, to the place, and to the time. And there are different possible approaches and different possible answers to these questions. But for us, and we decided to work as a group from the beginning, also because the context and the complexity of the art center is such that it's probably doable, but it's not fair for one person try and step in. And actually, I think it was one of the best decisions for this project to create a group and to grow the questions and answers and challenges together in the group. And together with me, here are 3 people, visual arts curator Oksana Karpovets, visual arts curator Ksenia Malych, and a theater curator and a critic, and we're missing one person of the group who is a music curator, Ola Bekenstein, which is on the train and getting close to you at this point. So our questions from the beginning about this, where, when, who, we started with them, and we were working together for half a year now, I think. And the interesting thing is that we keep coming back to those questions sort of with every iteration as we look at what is happening with the project and with our concept. And the relation with who, it's more or less clear. We are a collective of curators, and we're a collective of female curators. It was not the purpose, but that's the way it happened. And I think in certain meaning, it defines a lot of our thinking, of our approaches. But the questions of where and when, they create an interesting tension and a clash for us. And I think we will be coming back and discussing it for quite some time, because where is Lviv and Ukraine? And what does it mean? And how it fits in our discussion about decoloniality or post-coloniality. And the thing there, the point there is that for Ukraine in nowadays context, the discussion or the certain tension between post-coloniality and decoloniality is, I think, an intellectual and cultural debate is not noticeable enough, not present enough. Tension between post-coloniality as overcoming, but basically restoring the given sequence of order, sort of rebuilding the discourse of power, and modernity the way it was. It's just changing, the guy who's on top. And decoloniality is the approach which is missing to a large extent, and which we are very interested in, which is about the horizontal relations. It's between finding something which is underneath the levels of power, and which can, by this, overcome the power and create a different system of relations. The notion of decoloniality, which to a larger extent comes from Argentinian researcher Walter Mignolo, who was talking about decoloniality as a horizon beyond capitalism and communism, which is an approach we developed also, which he developed then with Postanova, which you were reading and we were reading, but this point of departure, which saying basically, I am where I do and where I think, and the locality and the position of the presence and also intellectual context and also an identity defines the way of looking and perceiving the world. And I think for us, it was a very important point of departure because, you know, in Ukraine in general, in Lviv in particular, with a huge overlap and clash of historical contexts and tensions and empires and discourses, this looking at the place where I think and where I do and therefore I am is also brings up the question, but what is this place out of which I think and I do and therefore I am? And what does it mean to exercise or to think decolonially in the context of Lviv in Ukraine? How far back in time you go in the decolonial sort of approach, and what are you trying to do, you know, as a researcher, as a curator? And as I said in the beginning, you know, I will be throwing questions because I think that's the most important part of what we're doing, collecting questions that need to find their way further on. So I don't have an answer at the moment. I don't think we have an answer. But this questioning towards what part of the past is important enough to be defining the place from where I think. Or is it even possible to you know, sequester or to cut the past into pieces and then choose the ones that fit and the ones that don't? And if we cannot do it, if we say that we cannot re-edit the past, what does it make us here being where I am? Another interesting and important question, which relates to decoloniality and to this thinking of overcoming the terms of modernity in the sense of the power relations and the definitions of, you know, what is the canon and what is the West and where we're trying to fit, is actually that in Ukrainian terms and in Ukrainian both political but also intellectual discourse, very often decolonization is thought in terms of catching up with Europe, getting back to Europe. And it's a very rich discourse. It has many parts and many sort of layers, and some of those layers are very much in sync to the notion of Eastern Europe and to the notion of Eastern Europe as a lost and abandoned child of the big European cultural history. And this catching up with Europe is not only in political or economical terms, but also in cultural terms as coming back to the great, powerful river of European cultural discourse, that Eastern Europe and Ukraine being part of it, at a certain moment was cut off. And if we try to think in the decolonial terms, then what does it mean, this very desperate attempt to reconcile and reconnect to Europe, again, in cultural and political terms, with the Ukrainian fight, sort of trying to be a part of the European Union, precisely in the moment when the European cultural discourse itself is crumbling, being shaken by many different decolonial thinking and movements, when the idea of Western cultural hegemony is being questioned. Another part of the same question is also, what does it mean for Ukraine in the context of Eastern Europe? And for Eastern Europe is in itself as a concept, when the global polarities of power nowadays switched from west to east, north and south. We don't talk about East-West contradiction anymore, right? The Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed politically and also very much intellectually. This is gone. We talk about the global North and global South. And in this tension between global North and global South, and questioning those notions is another topic which we'll maybe talk about later, but maybe not now. In this tension, Eastern Europe becomes even more of a white spot than it was before. Because in the tension between the global North and global South, and in the discourse of decoloniality, which comes from the global South, right? I mean, it actually comes from South America, and it was developed and articulated by South American anthropologists and philosophers and economists, and then it came sort of over to different continents. Eastern Europe is not colonized enough, it's not subaltern enough, it's not nothing enough. It's in the space in between. And the question is, how do we define this space? And coming back to where we are in Lviv and in Ukraine nowadays, what does this mean for us as researchers and curators working here? And that brings me to another question of when, because yes, it's where and when, and where are we now? And when is we are in, in Lviv, in Ukraine, in a post-pandemic, or maybe not post-pandemic enough, but to a certain extent post-pandemic situation. And the post-pandemic situation created, many paradoxes, but one of the paradoxes of the post-pandemic situation is that it became, it made very obvious the systematic inequalities that did exist in the world always, it's a very long time, but also in Europe, but also in Ukraine. And now in a post-pandemic situation, it's becoming harder and harder to ignore those systematic inequalities. I mean, we understand medical care, vaccination, the collapses of economies, the possibility of economies to, recover or not to recover, and what it means, for every society in this situation. And when we were thinking about this post-pandemic moment that we're in, we were thinking about the notions of simultaneity and care. And simultaneity is an interesting moment at which sort of we find ourselves now, but to a certain extent, it's also quite a global condition, which means there's so many issues on our plate in front of us, global inequality, medical care, economical collapse, climate change, political. How do we deal with all those issues? There are too many. But at this moment now, it's clear that we have to deal with all those issues at the same time, even if there are too many, because there is no time to delay. And for us in Ukraine, it also means that even if we want to dwell longer on issues of national identity and the past and cultural memory, we still have and we will, but the issue of climate change is not going to go anywhere. And if we don't, also we here don't do something about it, there will not be a question of national identity because there will be no life. And this pressure of dealing with everything at the same time, this impossibility to delay or to put something as a first order priority, second order priority, it creates a sort of paradoxical situation of equality when all the issues become to a certain extent equal. And by looking at them and dealing with them, we ourselves as subjects that look at those issues, we are challenged with this equality because are we equal and what can we do about it? And this other part of this issue, which we also run into thinking about the post-pandemic situation and also about this equality and equality is care. Because the notion of care is something which allowed us as a humanity in general, but also us as any given society and community in particular, basically to survive this pandemic. We did survive because we cared about each other, or because we were challenged so much that even in the situation where we didn't think about it, we had to care about each other. So now, what do we do with all this? What do we do with the decoloniality, inequality, and care, and all those issues of where we are and when we are and where does it bring us? In our case, we chose an approach, methodological path, if we can say, which can allow to connect these issues and see where we can move from this point. And this approach is one of the social ecologies. The approach and the notion of social ecology is, I personally find a very interesting one. In English, as a social ecology was coined by T.J. Demos, but basically it does come again from South America, as many decolonial issues. And the idea of socio-ambiental, which is literally translated as socially environmental, but I'll talk in a second about Demos, why he calls it social ecologies. It's a wonderful notion of the fact that the social world and the environmental world are actually one and absolutely connected. And the idea of disconnected, to disconnect the human, the man and the nature, the human world and non-human world, it is a product of modernity, something which came with the Enlightenment, also as a way of imposing power. Because if I, as a white man, can dominate all those strange subaltern creatures, I also dominate the natural world. I am the inventor, and the god is falling. The man is coming in its place, and we're still living in the aftermath of this world. And the idea of the social ecologies allow not only think in overcoming the terms of this, the binary divisions in general, but this human nature division, but also look at the nature as an environment, not separate from us, because as South American and Brazilian thinkers and indigenous leaders, Elton Krenak and David Kopenhauer are saying and writing that the nature can be seen only from outside. When I stay outside, I can see that this is the nature. When I'm inside, there's no nature. I'm one with everything around me. And this idea, which does come a lot from indigenous thinking and some visions of South America, and then through philosophy, anthropology, also kind of back to Europe, comes into the notion of social ecology as the ecology, notion of ecology as something non-invasive, non-abusive, non-extractive, basically caring one. And then that ecology as something which we use to apply to environment is you cannot separate it from the social world, because it's also based on ecology. Because if we are non-destructive, we are not destructive everybody. And the idea of the symbiotic relations between humans and non-humans, which we can refer to Donna Haraway, we can refer to Anand Singh, this beautiful idea of Donna Haraway of sympoiesis, of the poetic, fluid, symbiotic, non-disconnectable relations between different agents that exist horizontally and exist together. But out of all this, we came to the idea of organic communities as a challenge and as a question towards how can we, all of us on different levels, but communities, certain micro level of interaction, which can then grow into societies bigger and bigger. How can we, as communities, be better together, be more caring together, be non-destructive but growing together in an organic way? And can we actually be different if we want to have a future? And if we try to be and think about the relations as relations within organic communities, what kind of future scenarios it brings us? Because we're thinking about the project in several chapters, and one of the chapters, the final chapter or climax chapter, is called Multiple Futures. So basically, the strive to think about the future not as something given, and not as something created, but as something possible growing out of where we are today. And whatever we create today, or we allow to create today, can open different future scenarios that we have to think about, because otherwise, I mean, also globally and locally, we might very much run into a situation that there is no future. We didn't do anything. So that is us. Yeah, it's a certain point on the thinking way and project creation way, but there's still a lot to go. And I would be happy if my colleagues step in.
I have a small remark. This
is Ksenia Malik, which is not visible on the camera.
I will try to speak more. Yeah. Katya perfectly presented our approach and brief of what we were thinking for more than half a year, I think. But I wanted to add short thing, something new that I heard 2 days ago. We had a discussion with futurologists, and they came up with a new theory that all these new progressive eco-thinking things, that it's some kind of new soft colonization. I think it's very interesting because this foreign colonization, it will not disappear. I can feel that. It's like it becomes more wider and wider and takes in itself some more things. So we have like a habit to hear and to perceive this word as something really negative. But you were talking about like positive things about self-colonization, but here we only try and we're beginning to take this approach of eco-thinking, to think about what you are buying, what you are putting in the trash, and all the things. We are trying to speak louder about the climate changes. But now here is a theory that it's a soft colonization, something new punch. So that's what I wanted just to bring to the table.
Yeah, I, in your approach, heard a lot about colonization, but not a lot about modernity, because colonization is a darker side of modernity. So yeah, I think that modernization, modern thinking is kind of the basis, and then we see this darker side. And coloniality also needs to be probably, this term is very broad and it should be clearly defined. Coloniality, which is like in a traditional understanding, is like grabbing someone's land and colonizing other people, but coloniality, which we are talking here, is a coloniality is more what Anatol Kihano talks about, colonial matrix of power. This is what we're talking about. Colonial matrix of power is not a physical grabbing of someone's land or culturally influence someone, or a colonial matrix of power is that how you think. It's how you think. You can practice colonial approaches to local minorities. You can just so it would be on a global way. So coloniality is there are at least two colonialities, right? And also modernity is not just one term. Modernity could be Western modernity, Soviet modernity, national modernity, post-Soviet modernity, even post-Soviet modernity. So therefore there can be coloniality, saying like national coloniality in the frames of one country, it could be post-Soviet coloniality and so on. So these are really like terms that needs to be more clearly identified, defined what we're talking about. So we talk about colonial matrix of power. This is colonial power, colonial metrics of power. And here also, if you talk about self-colonization and self-orientalization, self-colonization seems like what we take from Western culture and knowledge, and kind of we always transform this. It doesn't matter where it is in the post-Soviet space, is it China, is it like Africa? We take this, like people take this and always transform it, always hybrid. It's like Western and not Western anymore, because it's transformed somehow, what knowledge. And self-orientalization is like what I see, what we are kind of using Soviet things, for instance, in Ukraine, like representation of Ukrainian. We're still using this to sell our brand, Ukraine as a brand. We still use this constructions that were not constructed by us in some sense. Something, of course, is ours, but something is like constructed by Soviet power, right? You had to be national informed at some point. So these constructions we still reproduce on a level that this Ukraine as a culture for selling to abroad as a brand, and this is self-organization. And this is self-orientalization. So those are nuances that are we were trying to think in the exhibition, and we were also thinking about organic communities as thoughtful communities that are not taking just like simple mono-narrative about ourselves, but dig as multiples for the past, for the present, and multiple future. It's not ideal future, it's multiple and complex and difficult, and we also pay attention to the conflict as a basis for the relationships, for existing between ourselves and between human and nature. It's always based on those relationships are naturally conflictual. So organic communities are those that understand this, that we are not like live in harmony. We live in kind of conflict, but how this conflict between not agonism, but not antagonism, but agonism.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's very important to be very precise in the terms that we use. It's true that the term modernity did not come up, I think, when with the presentation. It's something that we were talking about, and also this idea of, for example, of some territory having been through different types of modernity, Western modernity and Soviet modernity at the same time, and other types of modernity. So thanks very much. And I was wondering, maybe we can, if I can ask maybe Jan to react on this, and also in relation to the image that you produced that I will show you on the screen, because when thinking about, well, our group does not produce images. We produce discussions and knowledge, and we were thinking of, before coming here, to make a commission, to do a commission to a Lviv-based artist. And then we had an opportunity, thanks to Pavlo, to meet with Jan and also with Vadim Yakovlev, to whom I'm also very thankful. And we had a discussion about all these kind of topics, and we proposed to Jan to react in the form of visual contribution to these questions. So I will show you on the screen. This is the poster that you probably saw on the internet that we used. And I will show the two versions that you proposed to us. So it's this. So if you would like to comment on these two works that you did.
So I will start with my concern about this proposition, because I started to think from the name of this meeting, the post-Soviet, and I realized that I cannot really imagine that it's some kind of utopia for me. And that's why I decided to work with what we have now, with post-Soviet rather than post-Soviet. And this poster, maybe it's a continuation of my series of posters, which were like street artworks. So I placed them on the street walls, and there were also texts, there were messages which were not very conventional or which are not popular in society, for example, LGBT or the critique of traditionalism and so on. And I started to think about the form, about the shape of I don't know, about fonts and about some other visual elements. And here we also have that. We have this maybe a little bit kitschy and kitschy image, and this ornament, and also this second font, which is below the. Why I did this? Because I wanted this, like initially it was about this, street posters. I wanted them to be like not to be destroyed on the next day. It was the first thing, and I couldn't use this visual canon of contemporary art or contemporary design because together with this critical messages, this could be like too aggressive for most of people on the streets, and that's why I decided to feel this form of I call this patriotic fairy tale font, which is below, and also use this ornaments and other decorations. The most popular form, which uses these fonts now, it's about some grocery stores, but it's also about some provincial
House of culture.
Or provincial one, or like it sounds, yeah. And in this case, I took the image of packaging of a cake from the Soviet times, or maybe from early 90s. Why I did that? Because because it's the same like with that posters. For me, it's important. This first impression, it shouldn't be. It should be safe, and it should be cozy in some way. And because we have this content, which is not very popular. It's not popular to speak on that topics. It's like our view. Maybe it's problems that I say our because we may have different views, but nevertheless we are together here, and so that's why I say our like collective view on this topic of Soviet, post-Soviet. It's unpopular again, and that's why I wanted to make something which won't be aggressive if we place it on the street. And in my other artworks, not only with posters or with fonts, I also try to use the elements of, I'm not sure how to say, maybe traditional culture or the culture which dominates in Ukraine.
Make it like more friendly?
Yeah, more friendly, more safe. I think that safe is the best word, because when we speak about about artworks, even about contemporary art, we still have this part of emotional impressions, and this is first what we have with that. Emotions are first, and that's why this shape, this form is very important. It cannot be aggressive because we have this aggressive message. Yeah, and the other reason, because like few years ago when I started to use these fonts and these images, I started to hear from different sources about something that I called stolen form, and maybe the best, one of the best examples was about the radio of Northern Korea. They were speaking about feminism, and they told that there in Europe, they don't have feminism. We have real feminism, because feminism is about the right of women to give birth to children. Or something like, or the other, something like statements from the right wing groups that we are going to make performances and happenings, and maybe in English it doesn't sound like that, but in Ukrainian, all of you know that it sounds really weird, because performances and happenings and feminism and many other things, it's about like left-wing community. And but like right-wing communities, they started to use it, and it's about stolen form. And I decided to do the same, because this kind of packaging for the cakes that I used in this poster, like it's also related to me. When I was a child, I used to eat cakes from these packages, and all my school books, they were designed this way. And so I also perceive it like something which is very close to me. And maybe it's also about, like, it's about the topic we're talking now, because I'm very critical to the most ideas which are popular in Ukrainian society, but at the same time, I know that, for example, I have family which I didn't choose, but it's still my family, and it's a part of me, and I have to do something somehow with that. And if I want to continue living in the society, not to immigrate. Yeah, unfortunately.
Thank you, Jan. I only can see you very, nice to meet you. Maybe just first thank you for your explanation and the way you've been navigating this topic, because it's interesting how the image is separated from your thoughts, or like from your perception, or from the background, because I received this image only as an image. Sasha shared it with me, and I was following the emails, so I didn't know any discussion between. And I think that being here and having like my background, because my origin is Russia, I think that my perception was so different, like thinking more about this exotization of this font, this old Russian font, like these fonts or this aesthetic is something what also West, or like, something that is was tried to be exported, or like was tried to be to become kind of a good that can be exported as an identity, or it's a way to show this identity. And this is what I'm saying from like Russian perspective. I assume, or what I so far know and experienced, this is also something like all this this red ornaments and this image. This I also assume can be perceived by people coming from different countries is also something very authentic, or in a way, this is something also that first can provoke this feeling of, oh yeah, this is your culture or something like this. So like a very deceiving. I mean, what I'm trying to say, like it's like a really, when you look at this image, you're being deceived until you're trying to get inside and trying to understand and analyze this image. And that I think what I also liked about this image when I saw and when you explained like the first feeling of like calming down emotions that can come in the connection of this image, and then only then maybe trying to read the text or to get to understand what's going on there. However, I don't know if you would like to discuss this image now or over time that we have. Your image provoked a discussion within our group as well, and it was perceived very differently from by Sasha, by me, by Katerina when we shared this image. Actually, we would like to open to the discussion and to invite you all to this discussion. And the topic that we put in this in the title of the meeting, in between decommunization, desovietization, and decolonization. This is something that we realized we haven't been talking at all before, and it appeared that we all differently understand. And I think I was trying to follow Ekaterina's speech, and I took something from her to reflect on it, but I would like to maybe to invite you to share your thoughts, to invite you all to share your thoughts, how we can actually define it, or how we can in a way define this situation of the state of desovietization and decolonization, and how we maybe also separate them or understand if there is something in common when we talk about post-Soviet context. This is the question, I think, that maybe I didn't formulate it. How do you all perceive it? What is the maybe difference? How we can define it in the terms of, if we can compare decolonization, desovietization, and decolonization, or is it like totally different ways?
Just have some comments that colonization, the Soviet colonization in different countries, in different Soviet countries, it was taking different forms and different procedures. For instance, if we take Central Asia, there it was a colonization through orientalization their nations. So they were different, orientalized to Eastern. It took place on the basis of the race,
And in Ukraine, how in Belarus, it took kind of completely different form. It was colonization through erasure of specificity. So from the one side, it was the message national inform, meaning that I know who you are, I decide who you are, and I control this discourse. But if, like for instance, in the 30s, there was rise of the national identity, it was completely erased. And it was erased all the time. Like if it was something different than the tree, what should be national? So, and here it was erasure of difference, saying that we are not really a nation. We are the same like Russians. So this difference is very, very big between Central Asia and those Western Soviet borderlands.
And also the path that different former Soviet republics, but also the former countries of the Eastern Bloc, the path that we all went as of 89, 91 is very different. So when we talk about now, how we perceive what is the legacy of the Soviet times, and sort of, because if we talk about the, decommunization or desovietization, it's referring to that legacy, and then what is being done with that legacy. Is it canceling it? Is it reconceptualizing it? Is it finding a different place for it? And in all of those contexts, it's very different. And Ukraine is sort of one case, and the story how Ukraine dealt with it and is still dealing with it is actually quite complicated and not easy. So the whole story of Ukrainian decommunization laws, if we take the most recent example, which sort of brings us where we are now today, is a very tricky issue, which it's a story of a legal precedent of legislation which came without a public discussion, without a proper public debate, in this situation when it was an impossible choice. It should have come, but it was the wrong time because there was no public debate. And the aftermath of the fact that there was no public debate we're still living on now, because this public debate is now stretched in time, but based on the legal fact which is already there, and a lot of also quite physical consequences of that legal fact, like ruining monuments and ruining mosaics and vilification in the public discourse of the Soviet past, sort of kind of simplifying things. So it's very, there's so many sides to it, but this Ukrainian story, and if we talk about the wider realm of the former Soviet Union or even Eastern Bloc, each time the story becomes different because of the legacy of the last 30 years.
If I may add something, first of all, thank you for this discussion. It's really crucial. I'm from Poland, and you are so right. It's like a huge mosaic of the decolonization of each country, and I think also like different discourses. But also what I feel like a lack in this discussion right now, also in a Polish case, it's actually how in a Polish case Poles decolonized Jewish property, like especially in the small towns. It's like totally taboo in Poland right now, and how economical growth start to circulate after non-discussion who took over the property and what is the insightful taxation in small villages, small towns. So it's a very crucial book by Andrzej Leder, wrote a book, its Polish title is Przyśniona Rewolucja, Forced Legal Revolution, about the revolution without the past, thinking about the colonization of the property, which I think I don't know the Ukrainian case very well, maybe in West Ukraine, but I think it's a very important element to understand. And also what I heard today in this discussion is this colonial matrix of the power, which I think it's, again, very important of understand how, for example, in a Instytut Pamięci Narodowej, it's also rewriting the history about the colonizing the Europe, especially in a Polish case. Probably in Ukraine is quite similar, or is eventually a bit better, but these two elements I will put together, with it also rewriting the history and kind of smashed the idea of the ontological value in our society.
So can I speak out? I would like to talk maybe about this not so old problem of Ukraine, as Crimea and also our East, because I was born in Crimea and I grew up there, and I think that when we are talking about decolonization or colonization, not all people in Ukraine understand that there was colonization, and they just think about it like about just our history, period of our history. So that was like USSR, that was Ukraine, and so on and so on. And I think that that's why we have this situation in Crimea, because we some people think about this colonization like negative way, and some of people think this about this colonization, in fact, in very positive way, like with very, very sweet nostalgia. I think like it seems like Jan's poster with sweet cake, because I really think that, and I know this, that my grandma and my grandpa, they very like this time, that time, and it's not very surprised because they spent their young life in that time. And also I was also thinking about the stability of USSR, and of course now as a young person I know exactly that I don't like to choose that stability. I'd like to choose that freedom which we have now, but that time people didn't have such a lot of information as we are now, and I think that to have this information, it's very important. And some people in east of Ukraine and in Crimea, they don't have this information, and I think that this is a very huge problem for us today.
Thank you. Maybe we will turn to the online guests as well, if you would like to react. Whether it concerns the situation in Ukraine or in a different region or in general in relation to decolonization and desemitization.
No, silence. Cannot be.
I think, if I may, like reflecting on something that we touched in previous meetings, like once Cecilia, you talked about like a generalization of that made Lastanova in her text about Caucasus, and how she writes about this area in connection to other post-Soviet bloc countries. So like also very generalized approach to this desovietization process also. And when I look back to these discussions and these topics, I'm now also asking myself, when we were talking about these territories and about these processes, whether we have been talking about decolonization or desovietization. I think that since we haven't touched this topic just in the beginning to define that, I think that over our discussions, I also now cannot understand what we meant, because I think what I heard from Katerina, and I found it interesting today to think about this also process of desovietization, this process of emancipation of the power of the Soviet past and impact, and like reestablishing the in a way the identity, while the decolonization goes beyond it and tries to goes beyond this power relationship. And this is this is my comment. This is like a reflection. I'm trying to think loud, if I may, because I think this is something when we work with this topic and with these territories, I think these issues can intertwine and can be also mixed, or maybe it can also go together. So we cannot separate it one from another.
If also I can react to what you were saying, and also in relation to your program. It's true that Ukraine is a very interesting case, because you had this law about decommunization, which was introduced in 2015, right? And also I know that I see Vadim Yakovlev, even though she's hiding, but we had talks before about what is decommunization, what is desovietization or debolshevization, what term do we actually use? And also the talks about the tension that exists today between the law of decommunization and the law of cultural heritage, for example, in relation to some monuments. So maybe I would like to ask you, and also maybe Vadim, if you want to join this discussion. How do you articulate this relationship between decommunization and decolonization in your program, probably, or how do you approach?
We're asking a huge question, given the fact that we have 14 minutes left of a discussion. We could have had a separate discussion only on that, and it would not fit everything, because it's it's a huge discussion in the country. It's a very big topic, which is and will be there for a longer time. But Vadim came in, and maybe you want to.
No, I think one of the problems that I see in modern Ukraine is that we see process of decolonization is a process of some renationalization. So I think it's unacceptable. I think this is a big problem in Ukraine. What we see is what is Ukrainian nation and how it must be, because I think a lot of concepts that I see in post-colonial theory, it's what you say about we all see this. It's kind of transit, is back to Europe, but post-colonial discourse in how it began, it was about rewesternization. So it's a big problem, and one of the when we talk about decolonization, we must understand that the project of communism was a project of modernization. And now we see that we in another level of modernization, kind of pro-Western modernization, and we must be much critical to that modernization project of pro-Western kind of stuff. And but of course must see the problem of communist modernization, how it was. And I think this black-white view of communism, its problem, and it's very kind of close to some nationalistic narratives when we talk about decolonization in Ukraine. And I hate nationalism. I'm from Odessa, fuck nationalism. So I don't like this process how discourse of decolonization now is presented in Ukraine. It's very kind of nationalistic oriented, and it's a big problem, and very few people discuss it. So that's what I want to say.
What you were talking about is national modernity, national modernization. So it's like Soviet modernity has one thing in like we have to develop to the bright future, and national today's national modernization project is westernizing. It's a westernization, and it's erasure of past, so of Soviet past. And this is the problem, this erasure of Soviet past, because like it's again to start all over again and forget your history. It doesn't make complexity, it just builds one mono-narrative of the nation. So desovietization here, even if we talk in the discussion that desovietization is a good thing and it's like kind of equal to the decolonization, it's not, because it's also doubled. Desovietization to erase the old past is like negative. Desovietization to rethink this past and to decolonize some knowledge from the Soviet knowledge, decolonize own culture in a more kind of nuanced terms. It's a positive way. So desovietization has two logic and could be understood in two different ways. So here we need to make again specific. Is it desovietization on the governmental level, policy level, or is it desovietization on the level of decoloniality thinking?
But if we look at the Ukrainian art community or topics, what is dedicated to Ukrainian art, thanks to the decommunization law, a lot of Ukrainian artists just turn to the topics of history, of cultural memory, and started to work with this. They like opened their eyes to this, because before that we were living like nothing happened. We are newborn European artists, and then we were starting like in therapy, like first part of therapy, like just looking back and accept your past, and then trying to build something. So decommunization law is great.
The interesting thing of the Ukrainian case is, and actually thank you for saying this, is there's two levels or two meanings or two potential meanings of desovietization, decommunization, but what's behind it is two principally different in the meaning but also in the discourse understanding of modernity and modernization. So Ukrainian political discourse, and to a large extent kind of public intellectual discourse, is based on the political philosophy, and in best case Habermas, and in worst case I don't know in whom, where modernization is a positive thing which brings rationality, order, and through rationality and order you can strive for equality, but equality which comes out of infrastructure and rationality and liberal democracy. And Western model of liberal. That's why I'm saying Habermas in the best case scenario, because that's sort of that's sort of his idea of Western liberal democracy as a certain footprint, which also eased after 89, 91 was trying to catch up with this idea of catch-up revolution, right, which is what's coined by Habermas. But the Ukrainian artistic environment and community happily, in reality, I think you're right, kicked by the desovietization and decommunization laws, start to feel a bit uncomfortable with this idea. And then maybe, modernity is not such a positive thing. And maybe modernization is not really... And also, if you look at the Soviet past, the Soviet project is based on modernization paradigm, right? It is a project of modernity. So it's either good or bad. Like, what do you do with it? And I think Ukrainian situation now is this dilemma between those two understandings and basically two approaches and two philosophies behind what modernity is and what it means, and what enlightenment means. And it's also this case of Ukraine catching up with history, where enlightenment was caught in between Russian Empire and the legacy of Russian Empire, and also the legacy of other empires around And now how to own our own enlightenment and what does it mean for us and can we actually do it, especially in the case of Russian Empire, where enlightenment was to a large extent created by Ukrainian-born or Ukrainian origin philosophers and political thinkers. So that's a huge bubble of discussion, which is, I think the good thing is that it's here now. It becomes more and more present, because even a few years ago, we would not talk about it. There was not a subject for discussion. And now it really sort of kicks in. And
I think that's why now we have another director of Institute of National Memory.
That's also true.
Yes. It's also because of pressure from the artistic community and its effect. Now we have like a more healthy situation, if we can call it like that way, because I think the important reason also was the way how decolonization were started, like this stupid radical way, and that's why it was so a big factor for our really calm artistic community, frankly speaking. So sometimes when government made something really stupid, the artistic community unites and makes something. So
there's no problem that when we use this word decolonization, it's a very ideological concept.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about desovietization, well, it's very close to the history. You know, when we talk about gulags, when we talk about, you know, all the stuff that happened in the Soviet Union. But decolonization concept is really ideological concept.
Yeah.
You know, I know a lot of communists in Ukraine, and they anti-Putin, anti-authoritarian. And I look at them and I talk with them and I see, well, stop. Decolonization is something wrong.
Yeah,
even
because it's
before.
manipulative title and
Yeah,
official.
yeah.
It's official, but super manipulative.
So maybe we try again with the online guests, because we have time, I think, for one question or two questions maximum, or two comments.
Well, maybe I can just leave a little bit of comment. I just wanted to say that it was mentioned that and exactly like those kind of discussion didn't happen like for some time, and I'm happy that it's actually happening, because I live outside I say where I come from, and very often I was feeling that the colonization studies, they are like just too wide context, and like kind of I was struggling with understanding in the Western culture, in the Western context, this post-Soviet kind of identity, and as well the history. So I'm really interested into like this topic of desovietization, but also I feel like very often like the structure of power that were kind of linked to what happened to create the Soviet Union, they have like a much extended past as well. And so I'm, and also the communization. So I'm just like, I'm curious that we're having this discussion, and those like kind of like new names or like description of the processes that we are going, we are observing. So that's just a comment from me, and that's it.
Thanks very much to everybody who was present here, and thanks very much to everybody who was online. And we invite you all, if you wish to join us again for the next session, which will be happening. Let me check. Do you, Julia, remember the dates? Because
that's 13th of September. Is it right, Patricia? Oh, November. I'm sorry, November. 13th of November in Berlin. Patricia, maybe you can take a word, and because the initiative came from you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm working as part of the collective Slavs and Tatars, and we opened recently a project space in Berlin, Moabit district, And we aim to make this place a platform to invite other thinkers, writers, artists to take the mic and to dig into the subject that Slavs and Tatars and the collective is interested in, and to expand more perspective on this Eurasian platform. So we will also be with Ksenia Jacobsen, who is online, but I don't know if she's still here, who will also give us some detail about the research on the curatorial perspective on post-Soviet context. So you are welcome to come on the 13th, and I think the hours will be determined on a later stage.
Great, thank you very much. So if you happen to be in Berlin, let's meet there or online.
Slight chance, actually.
Great. Then have a nice day, and thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.